remember. You know, I was talking a few moments ago about a guy named Christopher Kelly, Chris Kelly. And he's a co-author of this book called America Invades. And I had learned that Chris Kelly lived in Southern California, and I was feeling sorry for him because in Southern California it's about 6:30 in the morning, 5:30, 6:30, I don't know, 2-3 hours difference. And Chris Kelly is on the line with me now, and I said to him off the air just a minute ago, I said, Chris, I understand you're in Southern California. I was going to commiserate because he was up so early in the morning to be on the air with me. He said, actually, I'm in London. And London is, 6 hours ahead of us, so it's 2:30 or so in the afternoon where you are now. Let's say good morning to Christopher Kelly. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Arv. Great to be with you.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. You're in London?
Yep, just got off the plane, yes.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
You just got off, you flew there from where?
We came from Seattle, a 9-hour flight, so, yeah.
Did you get any sleep?
A little bit. I was fortunate. Yes, I did.
Okay. So you have authored this book, America Invades. You're talking about, you're talking about veterans. You're talking about military. You're talking about history.
Right.
We have been involved in military operations all over the country, all over the world, I should say.
All over the world, that's right. That we have we defined invasion as fighting in. So if Americans were fighting with kind of boots on the ground, we just find that as an invasion for our purposes. And then we talked about how so Americans have fought in 85 countries, about 44% of all the countries in today's world, and we've been militarily involved with almost all of the rest in a significant way. So, like, for instance, Portugal, we haven't invaded Portugal, but we've had bases on the Azores since World War II, and they're still there to this day, so we consider that a military involvement. Mm-hmm. And when you count that as well, we've actually been involved with every country with in the world, with only 3 exceptions. Andorra, Bhutan, and Liechtenstein are the 3 that we seem to have missed so far.
Wow. When was our first invasion, the American military?
We were surprised that the very first invasion by and according to our book, in America Invades, took place actually in 1741. And this is even before America, of course, was a country. It was before 1776, the American Revolution. But there was a war going on. It was the War of Jenkins between the British and the Spanish, and it was fought partly in what is today Colombia in South America. And there was an Admiral Edmund Vernon of the Royal Navy who led an expedition that assaulted Cartagena, and there were about 3,500 American colonial troops that participated, one of whom was Lawrence Washington, who was the older half-brother of George. And the expedition wasn't successful, but Lawrence must have formed a high opinion of his commanding officer because he named his home Mount Vernon in honor of his commanding officer. And when he died and passed it to his brother George, George retained the name. So there's a connection between the very first American invasion and our founding fathers' home, of course, Mount Vernon.
As you researched this, you must have found a lot of fascinating things like that.
We did. We found that there were lots of interesting things. I mean, people know about, the Normandy invasions and D-Day and things like that, but there were lots of much more obscure involvements and things. I mean, invasions of Canada, for example. Here we have a long, peaceful, and a close relationship with Canada, fought 2 world wars together, but we also have invaded them back during the American Revolution and during the War of 1812 as well.
And Russia?
Russia, that's an interesting case, too. That there was something called the Polar Bear Expedition, which was during World War I, 1918 into 1919, where we intervened and sent troops into northern Russia, Archangel and Murmansk, intervening during the Russian Revolution, trying to keep the Russians on the side of the Allies fighting against the Germans in World War I. It wasn't really particularly successful, but we did have American troops fighting on Russian soil.
Now, in the Revolutionary War, the British were here fighting the Americans. We were fighting the Americans on American soil.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's not all. America invaded England.
That is kind of one of the astonishing facts, too, is that John Paul Jones, who's regarded as the founder of the American Navy, he led what was called a raid on Whitehaven. And Whitehaven is a little town on the coast of Cumbria in England. But at that time, it was the third largest port in Britain. And he raided with a sloop called the Ranger. He led an expedition. There was nobody who was actually killed or injured in this raid, but they burned a coal ship in the harbor, and the economic impact was that it doubled insurance rates right away. And the English press were horrified that the Americans were bringing the American Revolution to English shores at that time. So that was April of 1778.
This book is on the market now. This book called America Invades. That's
right. Yes, it's America Invades. People can find it at our website is AmericaInvades.com.
AmericaInvades.com. We can get it right there or learn more about it right there. So military invasions, U.S. troops, they've kind of shaped our world in a lot of interesting ways.
Sure, and I suppose one of the update on the Whitehaven story is that, of course, happened way back during the American Revolution, 1778. But in 1999, the town of Whitehaven officially pardoned John Paul Jones, and they launched a festival, and a music and food festival, which has actually attracted something like 15 million pounds of business to that area. So military history can be good business, too, I guess.
Absolutely. Now, what about a guy named Stephen Decatur?
Stephen Decatur, let's see. Well, he he fought against the Tripoli pirates in the early 19th century. What happened is after the American Revolution, we no longer had the benefit, and American ships and traders no longer had the benefit of relying upon the Royal Navy for protection around in the world's markets and on the world seas. And the Barbary pirates were very active in terms of capturing ships, and they captured some American ships, including one called the Philadelphia, which was a ship of war. Then the whole crew was captured. But Decatur was involved in fighting against some of the Barbary pirates in northern Africa, and was a hero in those battles.
Interesting. And I have read more recently, you don't find this in the history books, that when Thomas Jefferson was president, the Muslim community, Tripoli, Morocco, sent him a communication saying, you must pay us $250,000 a year to protect your ships from our pirates. Is that a part of the history that's in your book?
It is, because we have a chapter on every country in the world, from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, and we have a chapter on Libya, and we talked about how actually the very first nation to declare war on the United States of America was the Tripoli pirates, were from the Bay of Tripoli, which in today would be Libya, and they did so by chopping down. And there was an American consul, I guess, in Tripoli at the time, and they went over and chopped down the flag as their act of war. But then that provoked an intervention where and of course the Marines were involved in fighting in Libya, and so that's where you have the Marine song of from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. So from fighting in the Mexican War to fighting in Libya, very early in our country's history.
And Thomas Jefferson said no to the ransom demand and sent troops over and took care of those guys. I guess it's kind of the way I understand it. Is that covered in your book?
That's right. I mean, that he did they did actually fight rather than pay the ransom. I mean, for a while it seemed like paying a ransom, and there was a significant amount of money, and a significant part of the American budget was given to paying ransom, because for a while we did not have much of an effective navy, and but then we of course moved away from that. But for a while there was a ransom was paid for a while early in our history.
Now, you are a son of a Korean War veteran, descendant of Stephen Van Rensselaer. Tell me about him.
That's right. My father, he wasn't in the Korean War, but he served during the Korean War in the U.S. Army. Stephen Van Rensselaer was a general in the New York, he was the head of the New York militia, and he was involved in invading Canada during the War of 1812. It was not particularly successful. We didn't. Thomas Jefferson himself had actually said Madison was president at the time, but Madison was kind of the protege for Jefferson. But Jefferson had written that the conquest of Canada would be a mere matter of marching, which turned out to be a serious underestimation of the difficulties, I'm afraid.
Wow. Well, I suspect there are a lot of serious underestimations of the problems in war.
Absolutely. We often get overconfident and in terms of our abilities, and we learn painful lessons along the way as the wars unfold. I mean, you never know. I mean, when you start a war, you don't know where it's going to end up or what is going to happen because there's so many kind of chance events that occur in wartime and things that are surprises that are difficult to predict.
Christopher Kelly is my guest, co-author of the book America Invades, which you can find at www.americainvades.com. Chris, whatever got you involved in doing all this research necessary to write this book?
Well, I've always had a passion for military history, and as you mentioned, I have some ancestors that fought as well. But I also have a co-author who's British, who's English, and he wrote a book. His name is Stuart Laycock. He wrote a book called All the Countries We've Invaded, about how Britain invaded 90% of all the countries in the world. Mm-hmm. So, relatively, we actually have America hasn't invaded as many. I mean, we're at about half of that. So we're almost pikers compared to the British, but the British have a little bit more history, though. So that was how it first started with that one, and then we actually did another one called Italy Invades: How Italians Conquered the World, which goes back to the Romans as well and talks about the Italian impact on every country in the world as well.
Tell me about the positive benefits of invasions.
Well, I think that when you think about Normandy and that invasion and the liberation of Europe from the Nazis, to me, I think it's very clear that the world would be a much darker place had it not been for that invasion, and that invasion that really changed our world. And it led to less than a year after the Normandy invasion, Hitler had committed suicide, and the concentration camps, the death camps, were liberated. So, I think that not many invasions are also, of course, liberations. Certainly, invading France in 1944 was a liberation. You'd have to put it in that category too.
Wow, you mentioned the word underestimating. Boy, we underestimate what the American veteran has done for us.
Absolutely. That they have been literally around the world, and it's not just fighting, but also doing garrison duty, peacekeeping, helping to win the Cold War. After World War II was over, you had American troops serving in distant parts of the world. Not just Europe, but of course all over the Pacific, and serving in Vietnam and Korea and so forth. So yes, you have had Americans serving abroad, fighting abroad, sacrificing abroad, and of course they're still there to this day. You have about, for instance, in Italy today, we invaded Italy in 1943 through Sicily in World War II, mm-hmm. but there's still over 12,000 American troops in Italy in 2016.
A lot of those kinds of things we don't really think about.
Sure.
And too often we don't say thank you to the veteran.
Right, absolutely. I think Italy is one of the more desired places for American troops to be based in the world. It's probably on near the top of their list for being based. But nevertheless, there are sacrifices that are made. The people are separated from their families, and so yes, there are enormous sacrifices made by American military around the world.
Christopher Kelly, co-author of the book America Invades, and we can get that online?
You can find it online at americainvades.com. You can find it on Amazon as well, and Kindle and so forth.
Okay.
And 5% of all proceeds go to military charities as well.
And Christopher Kelly is calling this morning from London, England, you say?
That's right. That's right.
Christopher Kelly, you're a broadcaster?
I was in the television business for about 20 years in Seattle and Sacramento with Kelly Broadcasting many years ago.
Gotcha. So nice to talk to you this morning. Thanks for the information, the knowledge that you've shared with us. Fascinating stuff. And we can learn more from the book, America Invades. Christopher Kelly, my guest. Chris, thanks again.
Or great to be with you. Good morning to all the folks in central Illinois.
Thank you, Chris. And go get some sleep now.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Chris Kelly, as you may have heard him say, he was calling from London and just got off the plane. 9-hour flight from Seattle to London. So it's 17 minutes now until 9 o'clock in the morning. Good morning to you. This is Sunday morning.